Here at home, Washington State's Attorney General is at the forefront of this battle over the president's executive order.
Tonight, Attorney General Bob Ferguson joins us live from Seattle to talk about the lawsuit, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals decision, and what this state will do moving forward. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me on. Really appreciate it.
We are getting mixed messages from the Trump administration today, and we want to take them one at a time. Just in the last hour, White House Chief of Staff Reince Priebus said the White House is reviewing all options, including going to the Supreme Court to fight against your case. What is your response?
I'm glad they're looking at their options. I think they should, frankly, tear up this unconstitutional and unlawful executive order and start over. I think that's the right course, and I hope they are looking at those options.
And as you mentioned, President Trump has said he's considering signing a new executive order on immigration and may announce that early next week. So what would that mean for your case?
So it's possible that they literally tear up the executive order that's at issue in our case that could render our case moot. In other words, it no longer needs to proceed because we had prevailed, essentially. So the test would then be whatever new executive order he might come up with, does it address these due process issues, these equal protection issues, those constitutional claims that we have? So that's really my focus. If he chooses to write a new one, which I hope he does, the key is he just must do so in a constitutional and lawful way. That's the test.
And so if you feel that the new order is still unconstitutional, would you decide to file again?
Well, look, that'd be my responsibility. I'm in this for the long haul, and I know that the president has broad discretion when it comes to issuing executive orders, but he is not above the law. We are a nation of laws. No one's above those laws, and that includes the president of the United States. So yes, my job will be to focus on, if he issues a new executive order, to scrutinize it as we scrutinized the first one that's been rejected by 4 federal judges to ensure that it's constitutional.
Mr. Attorney General, you told him to tear up the executive order and start over yesterday. He may just end up doing that. But right now, foreign travelers from the 7 Muslim-majority countries can enter the U.S. because of this legal fight. For those who are already here, what advice can you offer if they are considering traveling out of this country?
Well, it's an important question, but I'm not really the right person to give legal advice to individuals. This situation is so fluid, but we do encourage folks like that to reach out to get some legal advice from organizations like the Northwest Immigrant Rights Project, for example. They have a legal team on hand who could give more personal advice to individuals and help guide them through what's been a pretty chaotic period of time for them.
You know, the chair of the state Republican Party has accused you of actually seeking attention with this lawsuit, saying that you're planning to run for governor. What do you have to say about that?
Look, that's the kind of comment somebody makes when they're losing in the courts and they don't have a legal argument, and that's what's going on here. The part that they leave out is that in my first term as Attorney General, I twice sued the Obama administration. I'm a Democrat. President Obama is a Democrat. I deeply respect and admire President Obama, but I felt his administration was acting unlawfully. As a result, I took him to court, won on the first case. The second one is still being litigated. So for me, it's not about who's in the White House, whether he or she's a Democrat or a Republican. It's about the rule of law. And so I don't spend too much time worrying about comments like that.
You know, throughout this process, you have landed on the national stage. I'm wondering what you have learned from the process.
Well, I'm not sure what I've learned about it, other than it's an unusual experience to have a case that, you know, essentially is so important to so many people, not just in our state, but around the country. So that said, you know, each morning when I come to work, the team's here, we're focused, we're working around the clock, literally, on many days. And that's really where my focus has been, is just meeting each of these deadlines that come up quickly as this case is moving through the judicial process. That said, I'm very excited that the 4 judges, two appointed by Democratic presidents, 2 appointed by Republican presidents, have all agreed with our position so far. So I'm very confident as this case moves forward.
Well, let me ask you this. Have you ever argued a case before the U.S. Supreme Court before, and how would you feel about doing so?
I've never argued before the U.S. Supreme Court before. I do think this case has the potential to ultimately end up before the United States Supreme Court. So if it gets to that stage, I would sit down with my Solicitor General, Noah Purcell. He's been handling the arguments up to this point quite brilliantly. And I talk with him about what's the best course for who's in the best spot to argue this before the U.S. Supreme Court.
One final question. You know, being on the national stage here, what have you personally learned from all of this?
What I've learned is that people all across this state are deeply appreciative of the work that's going on, and that the law is not an abstraction. We always know that as lawyers, but in a case like this, you see the significant, deep personal impacts on people throughout our state. There is an individual at Washington State University who was not allowed to go travel to his father's funeral at one of those 7 countries because he was afraid he would not be able to get back into the country. So when you see that level of impact on folks, it makes you feel good about the work you're doing. And I'm really proud of the team here in the office who's been working so hard on this case.
Well, Mr. Attorney General, we know you guys have been very busy. We appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much. Have a great night.
You too.